Welcome to the Psych Ward Podcast, where we have conversations with everyday people about men. We believe that every man has an authentic version of himself, so we're on a mission. And that mission is to find an answer to one question. What does it mean to be a man? Welcome to the Psych Ward Podcast. This is our first, and it's our introduction to you, the listener, so that you can get to know us and why we're here and what we would like to talk about. As we stated in the intro, we are really just here to answer a question. What is it that makes men tick? And to do that, we are planning to have quite a few different guests from different backgrounds, different views, values, beliefs, just to get a read for what other people think, just so you don't get tired of listening to just us. So introductions. My name is Dr. Eric Ward. I am a mental health clinician with more than 30 years of experience in the field. More importantly, I am married to my beautiful wife, Kelly. We have 3 daughters, Samantha, Caitlin, and Emma. And we have one granddaughter named Allison, who lives with her mom in North Carolina. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Mike Lucas. I'm a mental health professional as well. I have, 25 years in the field, but don't let that fool you. I'm actually older than you, so just a little. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in clinical mental health counseling. I'm here to find out what it means to be a man, or at least talk about what it means.
Hopefully somebody we interview knows. So, Mike, I think one of the first questions that I had, and maybe I think people should know, is why you and me? Why are we doing this? What's our goal? And why do you think the two of us can have effective conversations?
Well, we always have had really excellent conversations. I think we have differing views on what it is traditionally, at least, to be a man. And I think anything we talk about, we often talk about our differences more so than what we agree on. And I've always liked having those conversations with you. I learn a lot, and you challenge my thinking, and I think I do the same for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the things that I think is becoming more and more rare is the ability to have, I guess, maybe calm conversations with people who disagree with you. You see it on social media. I think probably social media and maybe government politics has ruined everyone's ability to have a conversation with someone that disagrees with them. And I know I same thing that you said. Every time I have a conversation with you or someone like you who has differing views from me, I walk away at least having learned something and usually challenging my own beliefs, which I think is a great thing.
Right.
So we said in the intro, and it's kind of a part of our tagline for the podcast, that we're looking to have authentic conversations. And I guess the follow up to that is learning how to be, or what it means to be, an authentic man.
Yeah.
And so I think first we probably need to answer the question, what do we mean when we say authentic?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. And I know for myself, I don't often think about what it means to be an authentic man. I think more in the terms of authentic person. And that's not on purpose. But when we started talking about this, I just came to that realization. And so I'm really excited to have these conversations because I want to hear what other people have to say. I grew up in a very traditional household. My dad worked, my mom stayed home most of the time. She worked a little bit. I still do live a pretty traditional lifestyle for a man.
It's interesting because I found that, I grew up in probably a very similar type of household. Both my parents worked, full-time plus from the time you were little. My brother and I were the traditional latchkey kids, but probably before it became a thing, we were doing it. But I found that I never, much like you, never really questioned, well, what does it mean to be a man, and what's my role in the world or in my family or wherever. And that changed actually after Kelly and I got married. She had been married before. And so Along with her came two very young daughters who were 2.5 and 4 when we got married. We've since had a third daughter, Emma. The older two are now grown and out of the house. And like I said, one has a daughter of her own. Emma is 15, going on 35, but still in the house. And what's interesting is being surrounded by women and nothing but women. Like even both of our dogs are female. So I don't know if God really loves me or is mad at me or what the case may be. But I am surrounded by women. And I think that was what started me really down the process of thinking about what does it mean to be a man? Here I am, the only one in my family. And part of my goal really in raising our girls has been to teach them in some ways what to expect from a man. I've failed at that miserably in some cases and done very well in some others. But it's interesting because you and I both also work in a very female dominated profession and we are surrounded by women. I spent most of my career reporting to female bosses. And so again, just another example of here we are, being conspicuously male, both of us at work and me in my own house. And I think for me, that along with the work that I've done professionally, working with a lot of men and couples, really just got me down the road of thinking, well, who are we as men? How did we become this way? And who are we trying to be? And why do we fail? Who succeeds? I guess those are the questions I've come up with. Let's go back to our question about what it means to be authentic. I know for me, I look at really three things when I talk about authenticity with other people. The first part is knowing yourself, who you are, what your beliefs are, where they came from. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. I grew up in a very, very conservative religious household. One of those things, no drinking, no dancing, no touching, no looking, no nothing. And one of the beliefs that I was handed and walked away with was, these sort of doom and gloom beliefs about the LGBT population. And it was funny because I never questioned those beliefs until I was in college. And I developed a group of friends and became very good friends with one of them, only to find out that he was gay. And suddenly there's your belief, right? Oh, there's your belief being challenged, right? And so I have to ask myself, like, well, am I going to not be friends with this guy anymore just because he's gay? And I'm not sure that I was raised to think that it's even okay to talk to this guy, let alone actually hang out with him and be friends with him. And so I think that was a growth step for me, was this recognition of this belief system that I had and how it had up to that point negatively impacted me in my life and my relationships, and starting down the road of trying to change that. So that first part is knowing who you are. I think the second part of being authentic is being yourself. It's truly being the person that you are. I think we all know people who maybe are very different in very different situations. It was funny. We, at work, we have interns, and sometimes they have the opportunity to observe us with clients in session. And a few years ago, one of them observed, and after the sessions, she said, "You're no different in therapy than you are like in your office or outside of work or when we go out on events." I'm like, right. It's genuine. It's authentic.
That's great.
Right. Trying to be who I am. So I think, those three parts, knowing yourself, being yourself, and then I don't know if this is the most important, but I think it's probably the biggest sign of growth. And that is sharing yourself, being willing to talk to people about who you are and what you think. And, even at work, we have a very personal type of profession, right? People talk to us about their secrets and their personal lives and their troubles all day long. And one of the things you don't find very often, though, is clinicians talking to each other about personal things at work. And some of it's just because we're probably overloaded. You can only take so much. But I think part of being authentic is sharing with other people, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and having it be an authentic representation of not only who you are, who you got to know, but also that person that you've been behaving as.
Yeah. Somebody asked me, about the podcast. I was talking about it, and I said that it's interesting because Eric and I have known each other for 25 years, something like that. And you have given me the side eye for lots of things I've done as a man, and in a good way. um, one that I can remember was that I used to wear a cologne called Happy, and it was made by Clinique. And I remember the day I told you, I wear this cologne called Happy. You were speechless. You just kind of looked at me like, "What is wrong with you?" And that's kind of what I thought when what I said to the person was like, "Yeah, I don't mind going shopping for candles. I think Eric would rather shop for a truck or motorcycles, but I'm kind of like
or a gun or a hammer.
yeah, more of those
Anything
traditional
with candles.
traditionally male things." I don't know what that is, but being authentic and being okay with that. And I think it comes down to what you said was like knowing your likes and dislikes and being confident in sharing those things with people. And when I was younger, I wasn't so confident about that. Now I'm much more confident about sharing that. Yeah, I like a good candle.
I think, it's interesting. One of the things I'm hoping we're able to have some conversations about, like you said, I'm probably a much more conventional male than you are. Some of that's good. Some of it's probably bad. But it's how I'm wired or how I've developed or whatever description you want to use. I think one of the questions that I have is it possible to be an authentic, stereotypical male? Like, can you be that person? Or is it just a show, right? Are we socially trained from the time we're little where we're handed chalks and girls are handed dolls, right? And are we socially trained to be this person who, like you said, doesn't go shopping for candles and instead is chalks and blah, blah, it's, I think that's the question I have is can I or can other people be a traditional male, a conventional male, and still be authentic?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what does it, what does it mean? Is it acceptable in our society for men to be men, boys to be boys? It causes problems, I think, for relationships and jobs. But on the surface, there's almost an expectation that you will be at least more traditionally male.
I found some of those problems when, like I said, I had female bosses, being maybe more stereotypically male. That also means that I tend to have or maybe come across as stronger, much more confident. I think women are socially trained to not be confident, right? You look at how we teach little girls to act. We teach them probably the opposite of confidence.
Yeah.
But we're trained as boys to be confident about who we are and what we think and what we do. And it was interesting because working for women, some of them very, very competent women in what they do. But I, over and over again, found myself being responded to in a really negative way by my bosses. And I finally realized, like, I am doing something that's presenting myself as a challenge to these people, a challenge in their role as my supervisor and as the leader in the organizations that I worked in. And it caused problems for me, being that sort of, hey, I have ideas and I know I'm right. And so let's get it done. And I may have been right, but the presentation of it maybe wasn't so good.
That's interesting. Even your supervisors were kind of challenged by that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's happened in my marriage too. There have been times where I'm like, well, no, this is what we're going to do. And, my wife will give me that side eye that you mentioned earlier and kind of say, I don't think so. Right. And it's funny because she grew up in a household where her mom kind of ran the show. Her father was a very, very kind, an incredible man, but he was very passive in their marriage and, sort of deferred to her. Every once in a while, she would start barking at him a little bit and he would say, "That's enough, Margaret," and she would back off for a little while and, then get back at it. But for the most part, she ran the show and he was passive, and whatever she said was what happened. And they were both perfectly comfortable with that. So a very non-traditional male role in his household, but in many other ways, he was a very traditional man when it came to raising his kids and providing for his family and being a professional. So I think it's possible to have a mix, and he's a really good example of.
I when I helped you move one time, he was there, and I thought, this is a man. I didn't know any of that other stuff, but I was like, this guy, he was carrying heavy things.
Right.
He wasn't that big,
Right.
if I remember, but he was all male.
Yeah, and for the most part, he was a man's man. I mean, he walked around with a roll of duct tape and a tube of caulk, and he could fix anything. Didn't matter whether he did duct tape or caulk. He was going to fix them with those. But he was very much a man, and I think he was respected for that. But again, he had some, like we all do, some very contradictory sort of characteristics to the rest of him. And I think that's part of what fascinates me is, you look at somebody like me, I tend to, I have a garage full of tools and workshops, and there's furniture in our house built with my own hands. And, I can fix a whole lot of things, and I drive a big full-size truck, and, I like to go to the shooting range and all that other stuff. But I'm also the cook in our house. I do probably 95% of the cooking. And it's interesting because between Kelly and I, she comes from a fairly non-emotional, or maybe non-emotionally expressive family. And she is very much that way. She is not one who cries very often. She's not one who expresses a whole lot of emotion other than kindness and happiness and joy and frustration and kind of those surface level emotions. I tend to be the one who, like, if we're watching a sad movie, I'm the one having to, like, turn away and rub my eyes a little bit to get the tears out. And, I'm the one who wants to have conversations with her sometimes, whether it's about our relationship or about something else going on in our lives. I tend to be the one initiating that, which I think most people would tell you is a stereotypically female role or job.
Yeah. I cooked dinner tonight. Does that count?
It does. What'd you make?
Well, I kind of cheated. Crock pot. Chicken, tikka masala.
Ooh,
So
fancy.
crock pot chicken, pre-made tikka masala sauce, and dumped it in.
That's cheating.
So there
Mike.
you go.
That's cheating. Pre-made anything. It should be grown with your own hands in your own yard. So, what is it that made you decide you want to do this podcast?
I love podcasts. I love learning. I love the topic. And I love going back and forth with you. So it was like I didn't even hesitate when you asked. I said, "Oh, of course, yes, that's what I want to do."
Part of what attracted me to the idea was really just trying to figure out what is stopping some men from being authentic, from being true to themselves and living a life that I think is in line with their standards and their beliefs. I think about, and this is probably 95% of young men, but we meet someone, we start dating them. She's gorgeous. She's probably the one. And we tend to pretty quickly move away from ourselves, right? Whatever she says is right. Wherever she wants to go for dinner is where we go. Whatever she wants to do, because we tend to sort of fold in some ways. And I guess that's what I'm talking about, but on a much bigger level. I think we all know why we tend to defer to women when we first start dating them. But on a bigger picture, whether it's the women in our lives or our children, our parents, our bosses, coworkers, neighbors, people we run into in the street, why are our men, I guess, living the lives that they're living, which are often not authentic anymore? Or am I off base and what we're seeing men doing is the new authentic man, right? I look at my oldest daughter, and she's dated a few boys over the years. And I always kind of joke with my wife. I'm like, when is she going to come home with somebody who can fix something or build something, somebody who can do anything other than play video games, right? And there have been some guys that have been, professionally successful and personally successful and all of that. And of course, I'm just a critical dad. But you look at those kind of traditional male things, whether it's knowing how to use tools. One of her boyfriends, it was really funny. This was years ago. Emma and I, she was little, and we were out in the garage. We were building her a rolling lemonade stand, with a big wood sign banner across the top, and a chalkboard sign that she could write prices on. And we had electrical outlets in it for the snow cone machine. Like we were building a serious lemonade stand. So I'm on the garage on the floor, and this boyfriend comes in. He's like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Ward. Hi, Emma." And I'm like, "Hey, would you mind handing me that Phillips head screwdriver over there?" And he kind of looks a little deer in the headlights for a minute and walks over to my counter in the workshop and comes back and hands me a wrench.
Oh boy.
And I was like, never mind. I'll get it myself. and I don't know that that's all that unusual anymore.
Yeah, I don't know either. But is that generational, or is it I seem to see this with even younger employees, just a different set of knowledge than what we had as kids. Like we knew what a Phillips wrench, we knew what a Phillips screwdriver was. And so is it a generational thing, or is it something different in the male brain?
I just finished writing another book. The title of this one is What to Expect When Adopting a Guy. And it's 156 explanations for why men act like men. And when I was researching for the book, I came across this really interesting statistic. There was a nationwide survey that was done, and it asked men, young men specifically, this question, like, when it comes to basic repairs in your house, anything other than changing a light bulb, basically, can you do it yourself or do you have to call someone? And over 70% of them said, no, I would have to call someone in to come fix that for me. And what was even more interesting to me, you take that 70%, 90% of those men, young men, said they were perfectly fine with that, with not knowing how to use tools, not knowing how to fix anything, and relying on other people. They had no issue with it.
Yeah, that's kind of like what it seems like.
And I guess, just to kind of bring us back full circle, we can spend, or maybe I can spend all day talking about tools and building and fixing things. Probably not your cup of tea for the most part.
And you'd be surprised.
Probably. But I think that's one example of what we say when we talk about, being a man. And I don't know that using tools, as much as it pains me to say this, I don't know that being effective using tools and being able to build your own furniture is a requirement for being a man. My dad couldn't do it. My dad had one little red metal toolbox, a tiny little toolbox with 4 tools in it, and didn't know how to use those. And so, but he was very much a man. And so I don't know that it's a requirement.
Yeah, I mostly got yelled at for losing tools. When I was a kid, it's like my dad would need that one wrench that I used probably as a hammer, and never put it back where it belonged.
That's the argument my wife and I have. She insists that she puts my tools back correctly, but I have pictures to prove that's not the case. All right, so let's wrap this up. We want to end each of our podcasts with some sort of a takeaway. And so, Mike, I guess I am going to turn it over to you. What is the takeaway for us and the listener today?
Yeah. So the takeaway for me is, I don't know what it means to be an authentic man. And I'm so glad that we can have this podcast and and I'm looking forward to the guests too, to get some differing opinions, but I don't know if we'll ever define it, but it's going to be a lot of fun talking about.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's like I said, just doing some writing recently has forced me into the research to find out kind of what other people have learned about men in particular. And there's a surprising amount of research out there just about men and about men in relationships. And, when I'm at work, when I'm not being an administrator and I'm instead being a counselor, I specialize in working with couples. And it's interesting because I have to tell you that well more than half the time, the men are the ones who struggle to commit to the process of change. Um, it, it's interesting because there's actually a whole chapter in my new book about men and commitment. And one of the things that the research tells us, though, is that men are they're much more slow to commit than women are, whether it's to a relationship or to a career or to anything. But the research also tells us that when men do commit, they actually commit better and longer and more intensely than women do. I had a coworker, and I mentioned this in the book. I asked her one time, I said, "Hey," because she had just been kind of fussing about her husband. He never does this. He always does that. The usual sort of complaints. And I asked her, kind of jokingly, like, "Hey, if you had to do it all over again, would you marry him again?" She didn't even hesitate. She said, "Oh, heck no. No way." And went on a rant about why and all of his deficiencies and everything else. And then when I was researching for the book, come to find out, there's a university that actually did a study on that very question. They asked men and women, "Hey, you committed to this relationship, whether it was marriage or long-term non-marriage relationship." And they asked them the same question. If you had the opportunity to go back in time, would you marry your partner again? And what was interesting was that 93% of men said yes. 93 across the country, right? That number drops down to 70% for women. So they are considerably less likely to stay as at least emotionally and cognitively committed to their partner than men are. It just takes us a long time to get there.
So it's sort of that Everybody Loves Raymond scenario where the women kind of are just putting up with the man. That research sort of illustrates that kind of thinking, like, well, men are just kind of buffoons and I'm just sort of tolerating him. And I know I've felt it in my life in previous relationships is that, I'm just being tolerated. And that doesn't feel good as a person, doesn't feel good as a man. So I can't watch that show because when that show was popular, I was Raymond. And so I can't watch that show.
So you are hitting on what is probably one of my pet peeves. And I've written about it before, and I used that exact example of Everybody Loves Raymond. So, those of us who are old enough to remember the reruns, we weren't around for the original, but that show Leave It to Beaver, right? So the father, Ward Cleaver, he was smart, he was hardworking, he had some wisdom, he had advice for his kids. They didn't always take it, but they listened to it. Everyone was respectful. His wife would sometimes disagree with him vehemently, but he was a man who was listened to and respected by his family, as was his wife, right? And even his two sons. The older one was respected by the younger one, who listened to him. And then you compare that, right? The respected, hardworking, acknowledged for his contributions, sort of father and husband. And then we look at Ray Romano and Everybody Loves Raymond, right? And the thing is, you look at television, movies everywhere nowadays, and one of the things that you will find is that if there's even a male figure in the show, right? Many TV shows have just excluded the father. It's just mom and kids. And there's no discussion about it. He's just not part of the picture, right? Or if he is part of the picture, he plays a very secondary role, right? It's a minor bit in the show. But like I remember when my older two girls were teenagers, I would sit sometimes and watch the television that they watched with them. And I realized that there are only two kinds of dads on TV. There's the Ray Romano, mom and the kids roll their eyes, mock him, make fun of him, tolerate him, but that's about it. And then there was the best friend, sweetheart, I know you snuck out in the middle of the night and took my keys and stole my car and crashed it, but I'm just glad you're okay. We're buddies. You can tell me anything. And I remember telling my kids, I'm not someone you want to mock, and I'm not your friend, right? But that's what we see nowadays. And it's part of why when I say, sometimes that men are sort of being minimized in our culture. And it starts with things like writing and television and movies, right? That media that people pay so much attention to. But men's roles have become minor in some cases and confused in others. I wrote in one of my other books, there was a commercial several years ago on TV, and it was for a diaper company. And the I don't remember the exact wording, but the gist of the commercial was, we're going to put this dad to the test. We're going to leave him home alone with a 3-month-old baby and see if he can handle changing diapers. That's a test now, right? It's a social test. It's what? No, we change diapers because we're dads and we have babies and that's what we do. But anymore, like it's a joke, right? Look at this silly dad. He's not going to be able to make it. He's at home alone with a baby. He's going to be screaming for help. Ha, ha, ha. And that's what we see everywhere we look.
Yeah. So, and I think you and I are from the generation where the shift was happening pretty hard. So like, what I saw growing up, and then me as a young 20 something, getting into a relationship and being expected. The big thing back then was 50-50. That was the kind of the phrase. And it was like, even that was like ridiculous. 50-50. I got to do 50% of this. I thought I just had to go to work.
Because that's what you grew up with, right?
Yeah, that's what I grew up with. And then they wanted 50-50. And so I didn't kick and scream into that, but it was definitely a challenge. So,
yeah. Interesting. All right, we are going to wrap this up. I am looking forward to it. Next time, we're going to continue this conversation and again, try to meet our goal of figuring out what it means to be an authentic man in today's world. Mike, thank you for today. Look forward to it. I will see you next time.
Thanks, Eric.